Welcome to our streaming show here at 8 p.m. I'm 10 Tampa Bay meteorologist Colleen Campbell, and I'm joined by the boys tonight. I have our chief meteorologist over there in Columbia, Efren Infante, and then, of course, right across the states, we have Ross Muma. That's in Jacksonville. So, hi, guys. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Well,
good evening. Happy Friday to both of you.
To find out what Erin.
Yes, TGIF. So we just got the update with Erin not too long ago, and which comes out at 8 p.m. is when we get one of those updates, and our next one comes out at 11 p.m. But pretty impressive here. So what's been happening is Erin is strengthening fairly fast. Right now we have winds at 85 miles per hour, so that has increased, that wind speed. We had winds at 75 miles per hour, so the winds did pick up with Erin. And then we have a pressure that has also dropped. I believe it was at 993 before. Now it's not 982. And you're going to hear us talking about rapid intensification as we move into this weekend, because that is something that is going to occur. So basically, when we have a sharp pressure drop, or we have winds that increase 35 miles per hour or more within a 24-hour period, that is known as rapid intensification. And it can be a little bit tricky to forecast, but we do know factors that lead to rapid intensification. One of those would be very warm sea surface temperatures. So right now, Erin is starting to move into warmer water in an environment that's conducive for further development and rapid development at that. Going over our hurricane facts here. So the first named storm is usually around June 20th, and this is going off 30 years of data. This is data that's been collected during that 30-year period, so it doesn't have to be exactly this date. It's just telling you when we normally see these things occur, and the first named storm, being a tropical storm, would be June 20th. Well, this year we had Andrea that was around June 24th, so slightly off that date. I wouldn't call that too far off from average. And then the first hurricane, of course, would be today. We had Erin that formed into our first hurricane of the Atlantic Basin for the 2025 season. Now, normally that date is around August 11th. So again, we're about 4 to 5 days behind schedule, if you even want to say that, but it's not that far of a difference. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We usually have our first major hurricane, Cat 3 or stronger, around September 1st. And like we just said, we could see Erin strengthen to that Category 3 status, Category 4 status as we move into this weekend, and that's due to that rapid intensification. All right, so right now, it looks like the hurricane hunters are still out. There's the G4 that goes around the storm. And then we have the Orion that is going into the middle of the storm, and that kind of checks out the eye wall and, or the center of circulation, I should say. And basically what these planes do is inspect the storm, gather the wind speed, get a better idea, because they are right on top of it, right? They're no longer, and this feeds into our models, which we're going to talk about, and that's when we really can get some good information. So normally when we have a recon mission happening, that's when you will see more of a jump in those winds as well as a drop in that pressure, because what's happening here is we're getting hard data. We're right there in the storm inspecting it, and they're feeding the data back, and that helps our models looking into the future, but it also gives us a clear picture of how strong this storm is, and we're, it's no longer a guessing game, I should say. All right, so I'm going to bring in Ross. I missed my guys there. We had our 3 shot up, but we're going to talk with them soon. There he is. All right, so we're going to talk to Ross in just a second. Ross, well, let's start off with the track, I guess, the cone. And I know you're going to talk about, or I'm sorry, Efren's going to talk about the models, the global models, but it's okay. We like seeing your face, too.
Switch back and forth.
Yeah, either works. Efren, take it away, by all means.
Well, look at the track. I mean, right now, we already know, just by looking at this, that we know it's going to be a major hurricane. Now, yesterday, we didn't have a Category 4. Now we have a Category 4. But look at the intensification. So right now, it's a Category 1. By tomorrow, probably at this time, we're looking at a Category 2 hurricane with wind speeds of 105. And then from Saturday afternoon, jumping it to Sunday, now we're at a 3. And that's probably sometime after daybreak, Sunday morning, with 120-mile-an-hour winds, and then we just keep on going up the scale. Now we're at 130 Sunday night. By Sunday morning, we're at 140, now pushing 145 by Monday afternoon. And we're going to stay to Category 4 all the way through this 5-day forecast from the National Hurricane Center. And by Wednesday, still a Category 4. Now, granted, there's a 130-mile-an-hour wind associated with the storm. But the two big take-home things from just this graphic alone is, one, it's up to a Category 4 now with 145. We get past 155, 156. Now we're talking about a Category 5. We're not there yet. But you're talking also about its trajectory. The cone, the largest area of the cone, day 5, is between Bermuda and the Southeast Atlantic. So people have been asking me, okay, so are we out of the woods yet? Not yet. It's not safe until they say that it is past Jacksonville, that it is past anywhere near southern Florida, until it's past the Carolina coastline. But the key thing to understand is that this is just a projection. Now, we've seen the projections change. We've seen the projections of the intensity increase. But the overall scope is that the computer guidance models right now, the good old spaghetti models, these models are almost consistent at this point, with the exception of 2 or 3 outliers. Most of the models, when you take all the models that are used, the European guidance models from the National Hurricane Center and from the Euro, a lot of them are pinpoint in the middle. But again, that model guidance is showing that it is far away from Bermuda and far away from the East Coast. So that's a very important thing to understand, that now the models are starting to become more in line with each other. The track, take a look at what the American Global Forecast System, where everybody knows, the American GFS. Look at the spaghetti models, and yeah, they're deviated quite a bit. But if you recall the models that we were showing last night, they were pretty wide all over the place. Several were going towards the right, heading towards Bermuda. A few were moving to the left, a little bit closer to the Florida, Georgia, and Carolina coastline. Now the American models are a little bit more defined. You still have a spread, but with the exception of 2 that are going right near, if not over Bermuda, the American guidance models are going consistently between the Southeast Atlantic coastline and in Bermuda. That's a very good thing. And the guidance models of the GFS, when we compare it to the European models are a little bit more widespread. Now, granted that a lot of them have it a little bit closer to Bermuda. But the key thing to look at here is that the guidance models from the European models, and if you recall when we talk about ensembles is every single run that the system runs. So the European model has got a little bit more, but the consistency of the European models is that it's a little bit more towards Bermuda, but when you take all of them together, the consistency is it is still far away from the Florida East Coast all the way up through the Carolinas coastline. And that is a really important thing to understand, because, Colleen, that is one thing that everybody from Key West all the way up to St. Augustine's and to Myrtle Beach is like, okay, how am I going to get affected by this? What are these spaghetti models telling me? How am I going to have to deal with this? And at least our ensemble models and our spaghetti models are indicating at this time, no.
Right, yeah, I think we'd like to see this trend. So, in the beginning of Erin has been a hot topic, right, for the last couple of weeks. And it's very important that we show you. That's why we started these streaming shows, right? Because we wanted to break down the information so it was digestible to all of you guys, because it's a lot to look at, right? And you see that one scary model and you're like, oh, crap, what's happening? But we like things like this when we show the ensembles, because the ensembles is basically, and you're looking at 2 ensembles right now, the GFS, the American model, as Erin was saying, and then the Euro in the white. And, it's in a pretty good agreement right now. So what's happening here is I used an example that one of my meteorologists I worked with before, actually in Fort Myers, said. So the ensembles are basically taking different scenarios, right? And it's, say you have like a bucket full of, you're trying to aim a ball into the bucket, right? And you have like a whole, collection of ping pong balls, and you're trying to throw it, and you're like, okay, maybe a gust of wind comes by. Maybe I'm going to throw this one a little bit harder. Maybe the next one I'll just throw, maybe I'll use my left hand. So it's thinking of all these different scenarios and kind of just throwing it and, coming up with a situation and a guess of what could happen, right? Well, this is when our forecast gets a little bit more fine-tuned when we have recon, which which is, the aircraft that's flying in and inspecting the storm, because that data actually is ingested into these probabilities, and that's when we start to see a better consensus, a better agreement, and now the models are coming together, and these runs, the run of each, the Euro and the GFS, I should say, and they're coming together, and we're seeing that thicker line where things are in better agreement and better alignment. So that's something we like to see. All right, getting into the winds right now. Oops, this is going, and I wanted to stop. All right. Hey, Ross. So Ross is going to talk about the winds because he's on the other coast in Florida. He's on the East Coast. And, yeah, you guys will probably have some nice choppy waves to look forward to if anybody likes surfing out there. But
yeah, we got a lot of surfers here on the First Coast up here in Jacksonville. Our former chief meteorologist, Tim Deegan, big surfer. But more than likely, any local surfers here probably not going to want to get out into the water. We'll talk about the wave heights and the rip current risk, actually making the surf rather dangerous for a lot of folks. But some of that is also just going to stem from the winds themselves. Now, this is showing you right now out across the northern Leeward Islands towards the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. And you'll notice Antigua, Barbuda, the Virgin Islands, they do get some wind gusts upwards of about 20 to 30 miles per hour, perhaps a few isolated gusts higher than that. But the northern side of Puerto Rico really doesn't get the brunt of the winds. Now, of course, this is the American GFS model, but it's a pretty similar story for the north side of the Dominican Republic, the DR, Turks and Caicos, the eastern Bahamas even. The core of the strongest winds, those hurricane and even tropical storm force winds, stays to the east of many locations down across the Caribbean and Bahamas. Now, as it continues to move northward, you'll notice an uptick in the wind speeds across much of the eastern seaboard. Bermuda as well, more than likely probably going to get the worst of the winds. They're going to be on that right northeast quadrant, the dirty side of the storm. You can often get, the most tornadoes in those instances, but in this specific one, the worst and strongest wind gusts there. But even if you look further northward or even west out towards the Outer Banks and Cape Hatteras, strong wind gusts there, but similarly up through Virginia Beach, the Delmarva, Dewey and Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. You got Ocean City, Maryland, Ocean City, New Jersey, Atlantic City, and even up towards Cape Cod. I got some friends who live up around Boston and Massachusetts. They're also going to be experiencing some gusty winds by the end of the week. So although it's Friday night right now, this time next Friday night, we're more than likely, still going to be talking about at least some locations up across the New England states, coastal Canada and Nova Scotia also, still experiencing some gusty winds and those increasing wave heights and dangerous just ocean conditions as a whole. But again, that was the GFS model. So overall, that kept it a little bit further eastward. And that's kind of been the trend here, I would say, over about the last 2 or 3 days. You'll notice the European similarly kind of keeps it in the same spot for the northern Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, the Dominican even. But as we advance it, you kind of see it come a little bit closer to Turks and Caicos. So yeah, right there, you could see 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts, perhaps even a little bit more, getting closer to that 40 mile per hour. And then continuing up toward the eastern seaboard. Not only in Jacksonville, but up along the Georgia coastline, South Carolina, North Carolina. I mean, things start to get a little bit hairy, especially from, Wilmington up toward Topsail Island, New Bern, the Outer Banks, as I had mentioned before, and then continuing even up towards the Delmarva area, New Jersey, New York, Long Island, perhaps getting some even stronger winds. Now, we're not talking about necessarily damaging wind gusts, at least at this point for most folks. I would say the Outer Banks probably have the best chance of that across the mainland U.S. But just something to note, if it does happen to take a little bit more of a westerly track, things could certainly be a little bit windier for some of our more coastal locations, pretty much from North Carolina up towards Maryland and Delaware there. Through Wednesday, Thursday, by Friday, then the storm continuing to move much further off to the north and northeast. We'll continue to watch it, of course, across, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maine even. But after, I would say, Thursday, for most of us across the southeast, our conditions will begin to rapidly begin to improve there.
I was going to say, Ross, I like how Bobby was saying earlier. So Bobby's originally from the North Carolina area, and he was saying how those small little, kind of intricate waterways, they could easily get flooded out, and it's not even going to be, as the system's offshore, just because of that northeast wind, and it's just blowing in. So some of those local areas, and of course, we're all three of us talking tonight are from the Northeast. We were laughing about that ahead of the show. And a lot of those kids don't go back to school. I know my nephews, they don't go back to school until after Labor Day. So, yeah, a lot of folks will be going down the shore, and absolutely this becomes a dangerous situation when you're talking these winds. And I thought I had the wave heights graphic on here, but I don't think so. But I'm going to toss it back to you, Ross, because I know you wanted to talk about the watches that we have in place.
Yeah, so there has been an update as of the 8 p.m. advisory. Barbuda no longer included in that tropical storm watch, so now it is just Antigua. So the island of St. Martin, St. Barthélemy, I believe, also included in that tropical storm watch. But that's it. And, you know, the three of us had talked before the stream. We were a little bit surprised that the U.S. and British Virgin Islands haven't been included, at least up to this point, in the tropical storm watch. But I believe your next graphic, Colleen, right, is the probability of those tropical storm force winds. And you'll notice really not looking all that impressive or worrisome, perhaps I should say, for some of those areas. I know Efron can probably allude to this from earlier in the week, but before they were giving them about a 30 to 50% chance, you know, to see tropical storm force winds. As we've gotten more data in, looks like that actual field is going to be, you know, much more compact and tighter. So we're only looking anywhere from about a 10 to 25% chance to actually see tropical storm force winds, not only in the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, but also in Puerto Rico, north sides of the DR, and similarly for the Turks and Caicos as you look a little bit further northward there, all the way up into the eastern sides of the Bahamas. So that is good news for anyone that you might happen to know who lives, you know, off to our southeast. Now, one area that, again, probably has a much better chance to see tropical storm force winds would be the island of Bermuda. And, of course, we're going to continue to watch rather closely if coastal North Carolina, you know, and the Outer Banks specifically, do happen to get some stronger winds if it takes a little bit more of that westerly track there.
Yeah, Efren,
I was talking about this. Oh, go ahead.
No,
go ahead,
I was just wondering. You know, I know you're in Columbia, which is, you know, more. It's South Carolina, but it's more inland. But you know, what are the viewers asking you guys? Do they have some big concerns? You know, because this is why we do this, right? To break it down for our viewers so they could get a better understanding. And now we're not only talking here locally, but we have stations across the nation. And, you know, that's why we're teaming up with you because, you know, even though you are further inland, what has been the response there? What's everybody been saying?
Well, you know, we've had viewers who are here in central South Carolina, in Columbia, that have told me that their family one lives in Lake City, so they watch First Coast. Another one, they live out in St. Pete. They're watching Tampa 10. So this is not just a coordinated effort between our three stations for our own television viewing markets. A lot of people are watching this, but the ones that have been asking us, because a lot of them were asking back when we had Hurricane Maria that went over Puerto Rico. A lot of communities here in South Carolina are very concerned about the Northern Antilles. So Antigua, Barbuda, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and then to Puerto Rico as well as Dominican Republic. The one thing that we know is that there is going to be a wind profile that will be going over at least the north shores of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. The one thing is that the tropical force wind profile now from the National Hurricane Center says there is a chance. So there could be a chance that maybe 1 out of 4 chance that we'll see 39-mile-an-hour winds. But the profile of the potential of up to 39 or 40 miles an hour, well, it's far enough away from both Hispaniola and Puerto Rico's northern shores. There could be wave heights that could exceed 2 to 3, possibly 4 feet, but at least the models, both the GFS and the Euro and the profile from the National Hurricane Center are indicating that it will be short-lived, and it doesn't look like it may be exceeding past the north shores of those Caribbean islands. Now, is that a guarantee? No. But the probability, and we've seen the spaghetti models, we've seen the tropical forecast probabilities. Bottom line is that the most intense winds are going to be well further north. Now, the wind profile right now, showing the wave heights, they're not that big when it comes to the Caribbean islands. Now, this is a different thing when we come to the U.S. mainland. Now, we're talking about wave heights potentially 4 to 5 feet, anywhere from the Space Coast all the way up to the First Coast. And then once you get north of Jacksonville, from St. Augie's all the way up to Hilton Head, now we're pushing maybe 4 to 5. And then you go along from South Carolina's Low Country to the Grand Strand and up towards the Outer Banks. Now we have the potential of it pushing higher, especially as we get to Tuesday and Wednesday, as it progresses, if the models still have it, somewhere equilaterally between Hilton Head and Bermuda. But the key thing is that this is a significant wave height probability. This is indicating the highest probability and the highest wave height possible. Most of them along the coastline of Georgia to North Carolina are exceeding 10, 11, 12 feet. That's the maximum potential. And then from the Space Coast to First Coast, potential of up to maybe 6 feet. Could that come to fruition? Possibly, but we're also talking about the very high end. The further it moves away, closer to Bermuda, then as opposed to the Southeast Atlantic, there'll still be wave heights, but it won't be as exacerbated as 11, 12 feet. In fact, I don't recall from when we had Hurricane Isaias, when we had Hurricane Helene, where wave heights got that high, but we still had high wave heights. And keep in mind that even if it doesn't come as close to the Florida and Carolina coastline, we're still going to have a little bit of a push, first from the north and then the northeast winds that will push all that water in. So also we have to timetable all on the coast when it's high tide. That's going to exacerbate a little bit more. But the bottom line is that right now all the guidance models are showing at highest maybe 11, 12 feet, but that is the highest that it's shown right now. Will it come to that? Probably not, but we're still talking about wave heights that would exceed 2 to 3 feet.
Yeah. Ross, did you want to touch on this at all? Because, I know you guys here in Tampa, I mean, I hate to say we're sitting this one out, but, we have our friends over. You guys, this would be more of a concern, I guess I should say, as far as wave heights and winds and, everything like that.
Yeah, well, Colleen, you guys deserve a break. You had Debbie, Helene, and Milton all last year, so you guys could use a little break from the activity. But yeah, I mean, we've kind of been talking. Monday's really going to be the first day that you start to see those wave heights increase. We're going to be looking at 2 to 4 feet by Tuesday. Then we're talking, perhaps upwards of 3 to 5 by Wednesday, 4 to 6 even. So we've already issued weather impact alerts for Monday and Tuesday, specifically for the surf conditions, the wave heights, and of course the rip current risk, which we'll talk to here in a second as well. But the other part of this, and Efren kind of already mentioned it in a certain extent, high tide. We're also approaching a new moon cycle here by the middle to the end of next week. So the combination of the consistent northeast wind, the just raising surf, high tide, and new moon, we could see some spring tides at some of our coastal areas that are the first to flood in situations like this. When we do have some higher tides, could certainly see some at least minor coastal flooding as you head into the first part of next week. So that's something we're going to be watching for locally here on the First Coast. And I think the other thing that might just be, that might make this situation more dangerous than in some other situations, there's going to be some dry air wrapped around on the western side of this storm down across much of South Carolina, but especially Georgia and northern Florida. That dry air is actually going to, limit our overall rain chances. So we're expecting a lot more sunshine. So it's going to be sunny. It's going to be, fairly breezy out there, actually making it to be a pretty nice day. Some of the folks who might have the day off or who haven't gone back to college yet or school or whatever it may be might think, it's going to be a great beach day. Let's head out. And they get out there and then they realize, we have these monstrosity of waves, and the ocean is actually really, really dangerous with regards to the high rip current risk. So that's why we're just really trying to urge caution to folks. Despite how it might look outside when you first wake up, the ocean is not going to be the place to be through at least the first half of next week.
Yeah, I just brought up this model for you, Ross, and I haven't really gotten a chance to update it, but I just took some things off. I'll just jump back in time. So what we have here would be the pressure lines that would be through the Euro. So you're actually looking at two different models here. We have the Euro showing the pressure, and then we also have the wind, which would be the smaller lines for you guys at home. That's through the GFS, or the American model. And I wanted to show this because the contour that you see in the background there, all those darker greens and well, the darker greens would be more moisture, of course. We see that here in Tampa. We talk about that pretty often when we have those tropical downpours. But as Ross was just mentioning, we have some drier air that's wrapping it in with the storm. And, we will have some nicer days out there on the First Coast where, Ross was just hitting on this good point to make, that some of you may be like, oh, yeah, it's a nice beach day. And meanwhile, you got big old Erin that's, not too far off the coast, by a couple 100 miles. But so, Ross, I don't know if you wanted to talk about this graphic at all. It keeps jumping back because I have keyframes on here, but.
Well, yeah, really, there's just going to be a pocket of some drier air off to our north, aloft in the atmosphere. And what Erin's really going to do, that counterclockwise circulation, it's going to pull that dry air in from the north and northeast. And you can see it right here by Tuesday evening, not only across Jacksonville, but down across central Florida. So Daytona Beach, Orlando.